Tom Sawicki's lab discovered a new species of crustacean found in Lake Jackson and nowhere else.
Beetle.
Only today, they can't find it.
So I'm finding insect larvae, I'm finding tadpoles, I'm finding fish.
Crangonyx appalachii is about as small as an ant, and the lab had previously found it here at the edge of the lake. But that was before the lake dried down in 2021. The question is, where did it go? Last year, we all got a good look at Porter Sink in Lake Jackson. Dye traces have connected the sinkhole to Wakulla Springs. It's this connection that brought Tom here a few years ago.
I was working with the Wakulla Springs Alliance, and my graduate student came out with us. We took a boat out. The water here, you can see how it gets dry down there. The water levels were high enough. Folks that around here know you can get, this is a boat landing, you actually take a boat and boat right out into the lake. And we did it that day. The water levels were at least a couple meters, maybe 5-6 feet higher than they are right now. And there were a whole bunch of us in the boat, so my graduate student decided, you guys go ahead and get your water samples. I'm gonna stay here and just see what I can find. He's detonating right around this type of area here. So you have all this grass, and it was really kind of semi-aquatic, what you would call the upper littoral zone, so the very edge of where the lake and the land meet. And he just has a net, and he's kind of moving around in this area, and up comes these specimens. But when we got them back to the lab, we realized they were a genus called Crangonyx. And that was of interest to us. It looked like something called Crangonyx floridanus.
Crangonyx floridanus is a small crustacean that has been identified in waters all over Florida. But Tom is finding that many of those IDs may have been incorrect, that instead they were closely related species of Crangonyx. In recent years, he and his lab have discovered several new species of small crustaceans, and here in Lake Jackson, they found one more. These small animals are a critical part of freshwater food webs.
They're important in terms of a food source for small fish, and so they're going to be really, really important in terms of, small fish eat the amphipods, large fish eat the small fish. So if the amphipod population collapses, that can certainly have an effect on sports fishing, for instance, in the region. So where we found it would have been in this type of habitat right here, just a little wetter. Right now it's pretty dry.
For the first time since Lake Jackson dried down, Tom and his current graduate student are looking for Crangonyx appalachii.
There is life in there. Not sure what that is, some sort of beetle maybe? I'm really surprised I'm not even finding Hyalella, and usually Hyalella is here in really high numbers.
Primarily we're using the smaller nets for the surrounding areas that are very shallow, and the bigger nets for the deeper waters where, amphipods are kind of all around. They live in a variety of different environments, and considering the water level being lower, it probably changed where the amphipods reside.
One of the things we postulated in our paper was that we found reports throughout the 20th century of dry downs, and then we found reports in Tallahassee Democrat going back through the 19th century. So it certainly seems that this would be something that any species that would be endemic to this sort of what we call prairie lake habitat would be adapted to these dry down events, which begs the question, what do they do? And none of the answers that we have at this moment are really satisfactory.
One idea is that Crangonyx appalachii retreats from the edge of the lake to smaller pools of water.
If the lake dries down and if they're surviving in little small pools, maybe it takes them a while to fully move out from those pools back to occupy all the potential habitats in the lake. That's possible.
During the past year of lower water, new vegetation has grown out from the edge of the lake.
This grass likely grew after it dried down. You had sort of the water coming up to the edge of the lake, and you had this grassy layer right on the edge of the lake. But it's not the same. It's not the same type of habitat. I don't know how important that is. Presumably important, considering we're not finding anything. Yeah. Hey Joshua, yes. This might be a good place just to try the Baton Rouge pump.
Another possibility is that Crangonyx appalachii moves down instead of out.
If these animals do go interstitial. In other words, if they do go down into the ground and live between those fine grained spaces, then this would be one way that potentially we could pull them out. But I don't hold much hope for it, but it's worth a shot.
Ooh, wow, look at that.
The question is just how would they survive the anoxic conditions down there? Because clearly, not a lot of oxygen, not a lot of decomposition going on, right? There's another possibility here that these things, because we collected these things in October, so there may be a seasonal aspect to their emergence, which would potentially explain why we're not seeing anything here in June.
To find out how Crangonix appalachii adapts to the wet and dry cycles of a prairie lake like Lake Jackson, they're going to have to come back periodically over the course of several years. For WFSU, I'm Rob Diaz de Villegas.